It's a warm summer evening in Waterloo Town Square. My kids chase each other through the gardens, ice cream dripping down their hands, cones all but forgotten. Around us, people cross paths between the shops and transit stops, some settling under umbrellas, others perched on the stadium seating. Suddenly, speakers crackle to life. A flamenco tune fills the air. A dancer steps forward with an invitation, and within moments, a group forms in the square's center. I don't join them, but I sway to the music, grinning at this unexpected moment of collective joy on an ordinary Tuesday night. This is social infrastructure in action. Welcome to Community by Design, where we explore the places and spaces that bring communities together. I'm your host, Jay Harrison, and today we're talking about public squares, those open gathering spaces that have been at the heart of communities across human history. From the ancient Greek agora to Times Square in New York, public squares have served as places where democracy happens, where people gather, and where communities come alive. But what role do they play today in our highly networked digital world? And as our communities grow and become more diverse, how do these spaces need to evolve? To help us understand, we spoke with Ryan Locke, a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo, who studies how communities experience public space.
I think that's a really good question. And just looking at a public square, I think it's the essence of what it means to be human and to really be living in a community. It's really a place of community gathering, if you will. I'm really interested in this idea of diversity and difference and how us as humans experience space and place. So in terms of my research particularly, I look at planning for demographic change in context of smaller communities and diversifying communities where newcomers may be moving to a smaller community and trying to find, how do you feel that you belong? How are you integrating into society? How do you feel the community is welcoming you?
Drawing on some of his past research with newcomers trying to find belonging in small Canadian communities, he shows how personal our experiences of space can be.
Having, for example, places of worship, we may look at that as a place where it's foundational to our belonging or sense of community. But in that study, hearing from participants, but really from people sharing that I went to a church. I wanted to really connect to my faith, to the community. And I'll never forget that interview. They shared, I just felt so lonely. I never felt so lonely in a place where, and I'm paraphrasing here, I never felt so lonely in a place where I just was supposed to be this place for deepest connection to what it means to be human.
Even in a welcoming community space, not everyone feels connected. This raises important questions about how we design and think about equity and inclusion in all our community spaces, including public squares. In a diverse community, public spaces hold a lot of potential for building connection. Ryan introduces us to a concept called spaces of encounter, the idea that being in public spaces and seeing other people might help reduce prejudice and build understanding.
It's about encountering others, encountering difference, encountering other ways of public expression, understanding different lived experiences occurs in public space, seeing various ways and walks of life, just being in public.
This sounds promising, right? Public squares as places where we encounter difference and build understanding. But Ryan adds an important caveat.
Town squares may not always foster that idea of deep connection. It can allow us to see and understand others from a broad level, but it's not as deep. And that goes to this idea of the contact hypothesis, which basically suggests that being outside and seeing other people in public may reduce prejudice. But that's not always the case, especially given public squares allows for a broader sense of seeing other people in the community, but it may not foster that deeper connection to really understand others.
So public squares alone aren't enough. They can help us see that others exist, but they don't automatically create understanding or belonging. Ryan also points out that different cultural groups use public spaces differently.
With newcomers, or at least if we look at what's called like the ethnoburbs, so we can just think of that as like Markham in the GTA, for example. There may not necessarily be this idea of like a civic life outside as we imagine, like an urban life per se, but it being more suburban, this is not to say civic life doesn't exist. It exists more in the shopping malls, in the Pacific Mall, for example. I think this really emphasizes the idea that regardless of our identity, regardless of who we are, fundamentally, us as humans, we experience place subjectively, whether it's based on our previous lived experiences, whether it's based on the community and how we conceive it being welcoming or not welcoming.
As Waterloo Region continues to grow, projected to reach 1 million people by 2050, Ryan argues we need to think carefully about how we're planning for that growth.
As we as a community grow, that just suggests we need to think about how are we growing and who are we including in the process of growth? Are we considering the different lived experiences of people from various countries around the world? Are we considering those with different lived experiences within our community?
Ryan leaves us with a challenge, one you may want to come back to as you're walking through the community.
Think back to, what does this place mean to you? How do you feel about, a place? Why is it that you feel happy? Why is it that you feel uncomfortable? What is it about this place, the place being a physical space, but even, why do I feel the community is welcoming? Or why don't I feel the community is welcoming? And how does that relate to my lived experience?
With those questions in mind, let's take a look at some of Waterloo Region's inviting town squares. One of the most active public squares in the region is Waterloo Town Square, right in the heart of Uptown Waterloo. To understand how this space functions, we spoke with J.S. Balascanthan, Executive Director of the Uptown Waterloo Business Improvement Area, also known as the BIA.
It's a whole thing of the third spaces, right? Like you got your house, your home, you got your workspace, and then where you are gathering. And as, we get the density increases, urbanization increases, spaces are they are scarce, right? Like so, and they are a premium. So any public space it becomes big, very important for social infrastructure, for people to build community, gather. Yeah.
The BIA works closely with the city to activate the square, to fill it with programming that draws people in, and the location helps. Opening up onto King Street in the center of Uptown Waterloo, the square is bounded by the bustling bus stops on King, the front entrance of the Uptown shops, Willis Way to the south, and an ion station to the north. The programming is remarkably diverse and changes throughout the year. Last summer, Tuesday evenings were dance-off Tuesdays. One week it might be swing dancing, another week line dancing, another K-pop. Wednesdays featured campfire programs with different artists. And Thursdays, there was salsa in the square, which regularly drew 500 to 700 people over the course of an evening. And the space works both when it's programmed and when it's not.
It's a safer space where you could sort of sit there and observe, and the square is set up in a way, you see there's sort of stadium seating. We added 8 picnic tables that are pretty light, that are movable. So you could watch it and then watch those dance activities. And then if you decide, okay, I feel safe, I could go join and learn, then you could do that, right? Or the first week you watch, second week you come back and go, I'm going to join. Okay, this is going on, right?
This is what JS calls the lingering effect, the way people gradually come to trust and use a public space.
The lingering effect is that it takes a long time for us as humans to start trusting, right? So, because in first time, we just drive by, we cycle by, we walk by, we are curious, we observe and see what's going on. And by watching the second time around, we may choose to stop and sort of check things out, right? And by third time, you become really comfortable. You're like, okay, I'm going to hang out, right? This is whether I'm going to go by myself, have a coffee, bring the family, get ice cream, get a newspaper, sit there, start reading. And as folks start doing that, and as the lingering effect gets multiplying, those spaces become safer space, right? Because you start seeing regular people.
And once people become more comfortable, they might take another step closer to the action, gradually building a sense of community, and they start to imagine what they could do in the space. The BIA's approach is deliberately inclusive. They're open to working with any community organization that wants to bring people together with free programming.
Our role, my role as an ED, is to, when folks, community organizations, they approach us, listen to see what their vision is. And if that's going to bring people together, it's community-oriented and it's free. We absolutely want to sort of help them make those events happen, right? Because it benefits to see whether it's Afro Vibes or whether it's Flamenco Festival or Strummer Fest that's coming up. These are all volunteer organizations. Folks who are making these things happen, they're not paid. They are passionate about what they want to do. So in my role as an ED and the BIA, Business Improvement Area, we have a unique role in helping them make things happen that helps the community overall.
But activation is only one piece of building an inclusive public square. There's also the question of who gets to use the space. When it comes to the physical design of the square, JS notes that accessibility is good. It's flat, there's stadium seating, movable picnic tables. But he's honest about the challenges, particularly around washroom access when the Uptown Shops Mall is closed. More complex is the question of how the square serves or doesn't serve people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, it's a good, interesting question, right? So we have the BIA in collaboration with the city. We have a program called Discovery, where there's a social worker with Working Center who comes up once a week. This program was fully funded by region, province during the pandemic. So there was more social workers working with folks who are marginalized and unhoused to provide any sort of assistance support. And over the years, obviously, everybody has cut the funding. But right now, it's just the BIA and the city. We still contribute to that.
JS explains that the reality is nuanced. Many people who are experiencing homelessness or marginalization are regulars in the square, and they're recognized as part of the community. But there are also challenges, particularly when substance use or mental health crises intersect with public space.
Where sort of like it gets tricky and complicated, Jay, is when folks who are unhoused, marginalized, and whether they have some mental health challenges or if they have any substance addiction challenges is where it sort of gets tricky, right? If someone's using something in the public sphere, it could be alarming for folks who have never seen someone's, whether smoking pot or smoking crack, right? And so that's where sometimes there is that friction or the conflict. And that's where folks who've been there, who show up on a regular basis, people know, people understand, there's a connection, there's mutual respect. Other folks who are sort of coming in and leaving, where they don't know the community, they're also trying to figure out the community. And when they have the different challenges, that creates challenges for them, obviously what they are dealing with, and then for the community, right?
The BIA works with the city, community organizations like the Working Center, and sometimes police to navigate these situations. It's not perfect, but JS is clear about one thing.
When you're talking about unhoused, marginalized folks and space like Waterloo Square, again, it's a community space, right? So I personally know some of the folks who are there on a regular basis, and they are part of the community.
This recognition matters. In a truly inclusive public square, the community includes people experiencing homelessness and marginalization. They're not problems to be solved or moved along. They're neighbors. As our communities continue to grow and densify, these questions about who belongs in public space become even more important. JS emphasizes that as we build more housing and go up rather than out, we need to create more public gathering spaces to go along with it.
Even as all the development, everything happens, we need housing, we need to go up. As that happens, we also need to create more spaces, right? More social infrastructure, more spaces for people to gather so the community can be strong, right? And this is one way to make that happen.
About 20 kilometers south of Waterloo in downtown Cambridge, another kind of public square is taking shape. Unlike Waterloo Town Square, which opens onto King Street and serves as a busy transit hub, the Gaslight District looks like an enclosed European piazza. It's surrounded by a tall condo building on one side, with shops and restaurants entering into the square in the center. And covering a section of the square is an interactive art piece built into the ground called River Lines that traces the path of a great flood in 1974 that united the community in response to its devastation. The installation responds with light and sound as pedestrians walk, jump, and run across it, building more interesting reactions as people interact with it collectively. The Gaslight District is different from Waterloo Town Square in one other key way. It's privately owned, but it functions as a public space. To understand how and why, we spoke with Scott Higgins, president of HIP Developments and founder of the Gaslight District, and Sherry Roberts, Cambridge City Councillor for Ward 5, where the Gaslight District is located. Scott grew up in Cambridge, and he watched as his hometown got passed over for development while other cities in the region flourished.
When I grew up, to a certain extent, young people had to leave Cambridge to go have fun somewhere else. So whether it was us coming to Uptown Waterloo, whether it was going away to college, university, Cambridge had some things, but didn't have a lot of things. And so it like it or not, it had this sort of Lambridge moniker attached to it.
The site that became the Gaslight District has a rich industrial history. It was originally the Goldie McCullough Foundry, which made power production equipment for Upper Canada and parts of the United States. Later, it became Babcock's Southworks, and then an outlet mall. Scott saw potential in the old industrial buildings and the site's location, but more importantly, he saw a need for places for the community to gather.
So we started to say, no, we wanted congregation. How do we rebuild congregation in community? Where do we get together and do things? And the other thing was the industrial cathedral that is there, if you've ever been, we wanted to re-expose the bones of what was built.
Here's something interesting. When developers build new projects, they typically have to pay a development charge of cash in lieu of parkland, money that cities use to build parks and recreation facilities, often in suburban areas. Scott and his team argued for a different approach.
Our position was, where's your urban park? Because, when you think about where people want to live or where they want to socialize, it tends to be in urban areas. And they weren't making similar investments in those areas in urban parks. So we worked with the city to say, can we build an urban park? So can we do placemaking installations that are interactive and engaging? Can we register easements over public squares? Can we put a massive TV for movie nights and for sporting events and other community things?
The city agreed. Instead of paying $5 million in cash, the company would invest $8 million if the city partnered with them to reinvest the development charge in the site itself, creating an urban park with public easements. This created a hybrid space, privately owned, but with legal protections ensuring public access.
It's fully private in its ownership, but we've put public easements over parts and sort of worked through what that means in terms of agreements with the city. I mean, really what it means is we're going to trust each other to go on a collective partnership.
This arrangement allows for something you don't typically see in Canadian public spaces. People can bring their own beer to watch a game or crack a bottle of wine during a concert, just like you might in a European piazza. Legally, because it's private property, this is permitted.
That's our liability insurance. But what we've said is we're gonna have a trusting relationship with the general public. And that scares some people sometimes. They're like, what do you mean you're going to have 400 people down there and you're just going to trust them all to behave? Well, we all behave. Like, generally speaking, 99% of people that come down don't do anything wrong. So why would we govern ourselves to the 1% that might?
Cambridge Councillor Sherry Roberts has watched the transformation of the Gaslight District closely. As the representative for Ward 5, it's in her district. And as the longtime chair of the Cambridge Accessibility Advisory Committee, and someone who uses a wheelchair full-time, she pays close attention to accessibility.
I think I'm very fortunate. I have a beautiful town square being the Gaslight District in my ward. And I've had the opportunity to see it, just bring such a vibrancy and life to that area. Seeing people come together in a low barrier, no barrier way, meaning that many of their programming is free, which is great. It's a very physically accessible space for folks with disabilities and other needs, families, people with strollers, all that kind of stuff. And I've just seen, the energy that's come into that space that, certainly wasn't there before.
Sherry explains what makes a space truly accessible.
You can think about accessibility from like a barrier-free perspective. And if something is built, with universal design, it's literally a place that works for everyone. It's a place that whether you need some accessibility features or not, it's going to function well for you. So in my mind, it's like level surface, smooth surfaces, lots of seating, shade, accessible washrooms that are open. That's always a big thing. And then, we have folks who are neurodivergent. Maybe sometimes we don't have super loud music, have the opportunity for quiet spaces for them.
At concerts in the Gaslight District, Sherry has experienced thoughtful accessibility planning firsthand.
The last concert I attended, they literally thought of everything. It was so fantastic. So, so there definitely is a way to program, first design. It starts in the design phase, making sure you have, good accessible parking, public transit, like nice paths of travel, places for people to sit is really important. And then, the programming piece as well. So good staff training, can really make or break an event.
She mentions things like having a raised platform for wheelchair users at concerts so they're not staring at people's backs, and direct paths to accessible washrooms. One accessibility issue that often gets overlooked: winter.
Anytime I walk past a municipal building and they have like the quasi caution fencing up because they don't want to deal with that, it blows my mind. I have a mini aneurysm inside because I just can't process that. Like, we're Canadian. February's February. We still go outside. So our programming is all year long. And as a result, our winter maintenance needs to be very, very strong.
Scott and his team take this seriously. They program the square year-round and maintain it meticulously in the winter, because accessibility shouldn't be seasonal. The programming itself is designed to be as inclusive as possible. Much of it is free, and there's variety from movie nights to live music to sports viewing to special events. Scott shares why this matters.
I got a great text the other day, and it was a gentleman that is new to Canada. His son is, I think, 7, and that was their first baseball game. But their first baseball game was in the Gaslight Square watching the Blue Jays with 400 other people dressed in Jays gear. And that was his version of his son's first baseball game. And he just said, thanks. I didn't have to pay anything. I can't go to a Jays game. I didn't have to pay anything. And I had a great experience.
This gets at something important about equity in public space. Free programming removes financial barriers to participation, which is crucial in a region where housing costs are high and the cost of living is increasing. Sherry emphasizes this point.
In my other role, I work for a not-for-profit that works with people with disabilities. And we do see a lot of folks really dealing with a lot of exclusion and they're stuck at home for many reasons. So I think having things be made safe, accessible, and free is fantastic because there's a lot of people that are on, limited incomes that can't afford big ticket to go to a big concert or something that's going to cost a lot of money, where when we have these events in these civic spaces that are free, it's so exciting for people because then they can fully participate and that's not a barrier for them.
The philosophy guiding the Gaslight District comes from Ken Greenberg, an urban planner who helped shape the early vision. Scott explains.
Ken had a unique way to say the kind of greatest measure of a city is how much fun you can have for free. That was Ken's mindset.
For Scott, this gets at something deeper than just providing entertainment. He sees the Gaslight District as an experiment in what he calls infrastructure for the human spirit.
We need the city to think about infrastructure for the human spirit. It's no different than a road or a sewer. We have to invest in these things as a city. And I'm hoping the Gaslight District shows that when you make those investments, you see the joy, the optimism, the play, and then those types of tools lead to the interaction.
Scott shares a story that illustrates what he means. It takes us right back to where we started in Waterloo Town Square, where one summer evening, Scott and his family were enjoying a temporary swing installation that was part of Lumen Festival in Uptown Waterloo. A man who looked like he may have been homeless was riding a bike down the street and stopped to watch.
He literally stops right in front of us, and it is just the four of us. There was 8 swings, but there was nobody else on the other 4. It was just our family. And I can see a little bit my wife kind of like, what's happening, right? And my kids are going as high as they can. And he just starts laughing and smiling and thinks this is awesome. And then I start talking to him. And then my kids start talking to him. And we had like a 15-minute conversation. And it was an experience for us to be like, hey, I don't even remember his name. I'm going to say Bob. But Bob is a person, right? And my kids probably would have went to the other side of the street when Bob came down the street 100% of the time. But because that interaction was there, it was playful and it felt safe. That moment for my kids and for Jen and I is an important moment. So where do we curate those types of things? We don't. We should. That's, to me, what we're trying to do in the Gaslight District.
But he is also realistic about the challenges. Funding free programming is expensive. Getting people to break their skip the dishes Netflix habits and come out to public spaces takes constant effort. And there's always the question of sustainability.
With the collection of tenancy that's down there, we ask them to contribute a small amount, a couple of bucks a foot, and we kick in a significant portion to program fund for free. So we'll never take that away from the Gaslight District.
Long-term, Scott thinks they may need to find community partnerships, ways for the community itself to help fund and program the space. But for now, they're investing heavily because they believe it matters. For Sherry, the Gaslight District has brought something to the Cambridge downtown that was missing, a genuine sense of place where diverse people can gather.
So I think it's really been, sort of a beacon to draw people back to like the downtown area. So because of the location, because we have, the pedestrian bridge that can get people across, they can spend some time downtown at our shops. It's just really livened up the area and brought a lot more like positive foot traffic. People coming and they're like, oh my gosh, we didn't even know this was here. This is incredible. We were just down there last week watching Sandlot on the big screen. It's such a great movie. And it was like all the Cambridge minor baseball teams were there watching it. It was so great to see them all just like playing catch, in the courtyard, watching the game or watching the movie on the big screen. And I was just like, this is so beautiful. Like just families coming together and yeah, it's just good vibes.
So are public squares for everyone? What we've learned is that it's complicated. These spaces have incredible potential to bring diverse groups together for celebration, protest, play, and those chance encounters with neighbors. But as our guests reminded us, people experience spaces differently based on their identities and lived experiences. What feels welcoming to one person might feel uncomfortable to another. As Ryan noted, public squares might help us see others, but they don't necessarily create deep understanding. Making public squares truly work for everyone requires intention, universal design, diverse programming, free events, and a willingness to grapple with difficult questions about who belongs, and the patience to let people build trust through that lingering effect. It requires a willingness to invest in infrastructure for the human spirit. As our region grows towards 1 million people, as housing costs rise and living spaces shrink, these gathering places become more important than ever, not as magic solutions, but as spaces with potential that's only realized when we design, program, and maintain them with everyone in mind. The next time you're in a public square, take a moment to notice who's there, who isn't, what makes it feel welcoming or not. Because ultimately, public squares are as inclusive as we make them, and we all have a role to play in building the kind of communities we want to live in. Thanks for listening to Community by Design. Special thanks to our guests, Ryan Locke, J.S. Balascanthan, Scott Higgins, and Sherry Roberts. Coming up next time, we look at how groups are using the infrastructure of schools to build belonging. Community by Design is produced by me, Jay Harrison. Our roving reporter is Karen Atkins. This episode was written by myself and Karen and edited by Darren Atkins and Srijit Ramaswamy. The music in today's show was from Rocket Jr., Par Hagstrom, and Loyer, courtesy of Epidemic Sound. Our executive producer is David Harms. This show was made possible by the support of the Waterloo Region Community Foundation and listeners like you. Visit midtownradio.ca to hear more local programming and find out how you can contribute to uplifting local musicians and community voices.